At first glance, what we've done tonight looks quite similar to hacking. Alistair Kelman is a computer barrister. Alistair, is this a form of hacking?
No. Hacking involves a person deceiving a computer into believing he's a legitimate user. All that you've been doing is sitting in the street listening to passing conversations. The conversations just happen to be electronic.
It's rather like overhearing something through an open window.
Yes, and the solution is to close the window.
Right. Let's get this absolutely clear. Is it illegal to build or own or use equipment of this nature?
No, provided it's not used to listen into government departments where you could fall foul of the Official Secrets Act.
Otherwise, it's no more than a radio receiver.
That's correct.
Does the Data Protection Act apply in this case?
Only if personal data is involved. So if you're looking at someone's financial records and those involve people rather than companies, then yes, the Data Protection Act could be involved.
Right, so who would the onus be on to protect the interests of the individual?
It would be on the person who owns the computer and is processing the personal data.
Right, and the man in the street, is it up to that individual to sue the company if things go wrong? Is
yes, he would be entitled to damages if he has suffered damage through the emanation of personal data.
But wait a minute, that means that something would have had to have gone seriously wrong first. He's only entitled to compensation after the event.
That's right.
So the law as it stands does not protect the individual at all until damages have taken place.
That was what Parliament said in the Data Protection Act.
Right. What do you think should be done now, then?
Three things. First, what you have done tonight, and that is there has to be a greater public awareness of the problem. Secondly, major British companies could quite easily come together and say, our procurement policy, our buying policy from the middle of next year is going to be that we're only going to buy computers which contain security. And that would mean that the problem would be forced, the manufacturers would be forced to deal with the problem. Thirdly, the government could match the private sector's commitment by doing the same thing. It could say all government computers that are bought are only going to they're only going to buy computers that contain security.
Do you think that's likely to happen?
Well, it all depends upon the public pressure that organizations such as the National Council for Civil Liberties, members of political parties need to put pressure upon their members of parliament to ensure that this threat to personal liberty is properly dealt with.
Supposing this is not tightened up, what abuses do you foresee?
Well, after the Big Bang, there's a lot of concern about what's called insider trading in the city, where people make use of confidential information which they shouldn't do for private gain. Now, this could be, if you like, outsider trading, in that other people could get hold of that confidential information, which could be very damaging to the Big Bang and to British companies generally.
Yes, what might threaten the individual?
Well, detectives could sit outside people's homes and instead of bothering to go for a telephone tap and search warrants, could listen in to the emanations of personal computers.
Totally legally, of course.
Of course.
What are the implications for industrial espionage?
Well, industrial espionage is growing with greater worldwide competition, and so, of course, this piece of kit that you demonstrated may be a standard piece of surveillance equipment very soon.
Alistair, I'll have to stop you there, but thank you very much indeed. So, what's to be done? The Ministry of Defence has no intention of becoming involved in this debate. The manufacturers are obviously playing the issue down. The banks, the building societies, the insurance companies, those organisations which handle our confidential information are apparently not going to spend millions if they can in any way avoid it. It seems clear that unless we, the general public, demand that our personal data is properly protected, nothing is going to happen.
Within 15 years of the cash register being introduced, just about every company had one. The same is happening with small business micros. With so many systems around, choosing the right one isn't plain sailing. Running an airline has never been the most reliable way of making money, even with modern equipment. Yet a small company in Coventry is successful using aircraft that first flew during the Second World War. Air Atlantique's fleet of Dakotas belonged to another era. They regularly appear at air shows, but it isn't nostalgia that keeps these planes flying. In a highly competitive business, they're simply the most suitable aircraft for the job. Air Atlantique has responded to a new type of trade. As manufacturing industries have cut their stocks, they cope with occasional unplanned shortages by moving supplies or equipment from one factory to another at very short notice. Air Atlantique has planes waiting on the ground, ready to leave for anywhere in Europe at less than an hour's notice. Margins are small, and with a staff of only 30, administration has to be kept to a minimum. In many ways, a small airline is like any small business, with invoices, bills and accounts. And trying to find the right computer system to handle them is an all too familiar problem.
We did not really know what we were looking for. We just felt that it would be a good idea to get a computer to try and achieve what we were trying to achieve. And it's fair to say that, not really knowing what we were doing, we got the wrong equipment to begin with. We also were not able to convey to the software manufacturers precisely what we were after, so they didn't produce really what we were after, and we had to go back and get some more software. And it's taken some time to get the right combination of software and hardware.
Air Atlantique doesn't have a seat reservation system, but running a small airline does have its own particular problems. A host of regulations and safety requirements have to be met, and planning a flight involves everything from calculating the pilot's flying hours to knowing where to store the cargo. Many large airlines use computers for this sort of work, but specially written software would have been both expensive and unproven. The company chose instead to buy a fairly straightforward system that could easily handle their basic accounts.
To choose a system, we basically went through the local yellow pages and looked up all the dealers that had the software that we wanted to buy. So we went to those dealers, and the dealers which gave us the best response, sent us letters and phoned us, etc. We went back to them and actually had an interview with them and looked at their software on their machines. And then we chose between those two, basically, by looking at the dealer and the kind of backup he would give us after we'd bought the package, and the machine that we would be able to use the package on, because we wanted to buy both the machine and the package from the same dealer. The tandem machine was very good value for the money. It gave us a hard disk, which meant that we could use it in the future as well as now. We wouldn't be restricted by the amount of space we had. And the Sage package was everything we wanted the accounting to do, but we could also upgrade fairly easily to more advanced packages without too many problems.
Without a doubt, the most important attribute of having a computer is the production of monthly management accounts. Using a computer for accounting can give you figures within a few days of the end of each month. And a small company needs to know where it is. It needs to know whether it's making a profit or a loss, whether it's selling at the right price. And if you use human beings on this, you can still get the information within a few days, but you'll need quite a few human beings, and they'll need to be experts really at the job.
Now that a computer is successfully handling the accounts, the company is starting to use computers in other ways. Air Atlantique does much of its own maintenance, and like all airlines, is required by law to keep its operational procedures up to date. Rewriting the necessary manuals used to be very time-consuming, but now a £400 work processor can do the work very easily. In general, this company's introduction of computers has been rightly cautious, buying only what they need at any time and being very careful not to become over-dependent.
My advice to any small business getting a computer is to expect a couple of years to pass before you really get the best out of the computer. But once you are beginning to get the best out of it in maybe one particular facet, perhaps the accounts, then to consider expanding the use of the computer into other areas, but not to run before you can walk.
35, 40 inches.
Air Atlantique's Dakotas were flying long before the first commercial computers were built. The company hopes that their micros will help keep the planes in the air for many years to come. There are 4 popular uses for micros in a small business. There's sorting out your finances with an accounting package, or word processing. Air Atlantic did both of these. Then you may want to plan ahead using a spreadsheet, or put your filing onto a database. Well, any of these systems, properly applied, could be good for business. But where do you go for advice? Well, you could try starting with magazines like these. There are a number of them which specialise in giving advice for first-time business users. But one of the best guides is this one here. And the first article, called Prepare Yourself, was written by Kathy Lang. Kathy, nowadays you could buy quite a good personal business micro for about £400. But that's really not all you're risking, is it?
It certainly isn't. We saw on the film how Air Atlantique had all their accounts on their computer, and if that didn't work properly, then their business could go bust as a result.
So there is a risk in actually implementing a total system. What do you have to do before you actually go out and buy a computer?
Well, the first thing to do is to decide what you really want to use it for, and then to try to get some feel for what amount of information we're talking about, to get some figures. What are the critical times of year when the system's going to be most busy? How quickly do you need the results? To write that down, and then when you've written it down, you've got a checklist that you can use to help you choose a system, and also to give you some success criteria so you know whether you've achieved what you set out to achieve.
At this point in time, you're not really worrying about the type of computer or even the power of the computer.
No. First of all, decide what you want to do, and then think about the software to do it with. Equipment comes last.
Right, so you've written down what you want to do, you've got some good idea of how much it's going to contribute to your business, you've then got to go and find a dealer or somebody to buy the machine from and the system. How do you go about doing that?
If you're computerizing for the first time, then it's very likely that you'll need some help and support at the beginning, so it's sensible to try and buy the machine from somebody local. So you can look in the yellow pages.
Like Air Atlantique did.
Exactly.
That's pretty unusual.
Yes, not many people do that. But nevertheless, it's certainly one good way. You can ask other users, people who already got computers, where they bought their system from and what they think of the supplier. You can talk to people at your local college or polytechnic, because they're in contact with a lot of other users who already bought computers, and they'll have views on the local dealers.
Because there are very cheap micros around today that you can just buy from a high street store, and you're not going to get much advice from them, are you?
Absolutely not. If you pay washing machine prices, the chances are you'll get no more support than you would for a washing machine. But you don't just have to expect support from the people that you bought the machine from in the first place.
So you've selected a dealer, let us say. What do you expect from your dealer? What questions would you ask him?
Well, I think the first thing to ask him to find out is whether he's ever installed systems of the sort that you're thinking of installing. Mm-hmm. Find out what his experience is. And then you should ask him if you can talk to one or two people who've already bought systems from him, so you can see what their experience was.
Preferably in the same sort of business that you're actually in.
That's right, exactly. Mm-hmm. Then you should find out what sort of training he'll offer and whether he'll give a warranty. And you should get him to write his answers down if you're spending any sort of sizable sum of money. And the money side is important. If you are spending a sizable sum of money, try to keep some of it back so that you're sure the system works. Don't pay it all over right at the beginning.
And how would you detect a bad deal? A quick one.
Well, a scruffy outfit is usually a very bad sign.
And the bottom line, what would you recommend, your final piece of advice?
I think if people apply the same scepticism that they would to buying a second-hand car, they won't go far wrong.
Thank you very much, Kathy. So to sum up, first analyse your business needs and write them down. Then find a good dealer. But remember, you know your business far better than they do. Above all, keep it simple and don't expect too much from your first application. And finally, if you want a copy of Kathy's guide, send for it.
And the address will be at the end of the programme. Next week, we'll be taking another look at small business software, but until then, we'll be back at our old time of 7:30. Good night.